Stuck up on us, huh? All right, here we are, Wednesday, everybody. We got Matt Shapiro. He's back from his long absence. All right.
Hello.
We got Tim Stevie and Jared Kabika Miller. We are DebateSensei. We're going to be talking about the presidential debates. I got this thing going on right here. This is like Robert De Niro from Cape Fear type of stuff right here.
You're always looking good, Jared.
That's some real dirt mullet back there. I like that. That's some
And the beard is Robert De Niro from Deer Hunter. So I just got a whole homage going on here.
It's good, dude. It's good. I encourage it. Now you just need the gun and the bad attitude, and you'll be fine.
All right, everyone. You know we were going to talk about it. I mean, this is DebateSensei, and this is the day after the first presidential debate of 2020. And, oh, man, I think by all accounts, this was rough. This was just a rough debate for people to watch. They watch it, and they saw something that they haven't seen in presidential debates before. All right, that's my first impression. What are your first impressions?
I don't think there was much clash, which I know that we all come to expect, right? Like, debates at a presidential level are about sound bites. They don't particularly even care about engaging with each other's arguments. They absolutely don't care about answering questions. It's just like, how can I fit in some speech time that the other person, I don't know, has to deal with, like a WWE SmackDown type of, trash talk. Like, that's really the level of engagement. Like, I think there were maybe two arguments that got past. So in debate, you got argument, and then you have refutation, and then you have rejoinder. If you make it to the third level of like a refutation to a refutation, I think maybe one argument made it to the rejoinder step, but not even many made it to like the refutation step of a debate. So I thought that was a little bit disappointing, but also like as to be expected, I guess. So even on the soundbite front, I don't think that a whole ton of progress was necessarily made. I think it was a lot of like trying to throw the other person off and like more of a tactical attempt to just like appear like it's a posture more than it was like a competition of ideas.
Yeah. What do you think?
Everything you said, I agree with in so many words. I think we've kind of even touched on it here. I will say first and foremost, I'm still in the camp of people who think it's good that we watched it and it's good that it happened. And it wasn't for nothing. And but there's a lot of people who I've even talked to in the last 24 hours who are just like, I don't even know why they do this. And so let's just start with that. I am glad it happened. I'm glad I even watched it. And Tim, you're right. I think one of the things I'm going to be talking about, the themes I like to talk about today, is just kind of what are the differences between what we expect a competitive debater to do and how they are supposed to act, in a round. We can even take it to a courtroom. How is a lawyer supposed to act in a courtroom versus what the, expectation of a president is to speak in a debate. And I think one funny thing that, we could maybe start off with is kind of talking about who is the president, or when I say the president, who are the candidates talking to, right? I think it gets a little bit lost, right? In our competitive rounds.
Let's start there. All right. The moderator. So in presidential debates, very different than in competitive debate, right? It's like the moderator is really is the judge. They are the audience. Right?
I wouldn't say they're the judge.
What? No.
They don't determine the winner. I mean, they're there to
competition. In competition, the moderator, there is no moderator. There's only a judge, but the judge does some sort of moderating. You know what I mean? They make sure that people are speaking in order, but that's about it. There's none of the. They don't generate the questions. They don't, like enforce the time rules. Everyone knows the time rules and they follow them. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know why there's no hopefully. Yeah, like I mean, they just get dropped if they don't.
The moderator literally steers the entire debate. I mean, that's one thing that's just fundamentally different. Is in a debate, the only other person in the room is a person who sits silently, absent, something crazy happening. But and they do dictate winning, which is also different. The only person in that room with President Trump and Joe Biden did not dictate a winner. There was no ballot, right? Yeah. So it's not. They are different, and I think this. I would want to kind of talk about this at the end, but it's inherently coming up now because one of the other differences is, we were talking about it just in the minutes before we got on here, where it's like, who's the winner of the debate? Okay, everyone may have a subjective opinion of like, oh, I think this person clearly won, but the ballot, technically speaking, in my mind, is the election. Right. And one fundamental difference between winning an election and winning a competitive debate is there's a million people do not have to watch this debate to vote for the election. Right. Like this questionably has some role in the election, but to what degree, I don't know. Whereas in a competitive debate,
how much do you think? That's a bit of a question, right? Like, how much impact do you think that debates actually have on the election?
I have a question for you. What percentage was based on this debate if X person wins? What percentage was based on this debate? That's unknowable. I'm asking you.
But people did calculate it. Like, there was a calculation that Biden's chances of winning the presidency increased by 3%. I don't know how the hell they came up with that. You know what I mean? But somebody came up with it. They published their findings, and they I'm hoping they have some sort of method to that, but I'm just not interested enough to figure it out.
Yeah, so. I don't mean to digress too hard. And we were talking about the moderator, right, and the role of the moderator. So one fundamental difference is in a debate round, absent kind of some crazy things happening, judges don't speak. And yesterday, like all the other debates we've seen for the presidents, we have a person in the room who kind of steers the conversation. Let me ask you this, honest to goodness question: do you feel like the moderator was neutral?
I thought the questions were. Sorry, Jared, go ahead.
No. You go ahead, man.
I thought that the questions were better posed than I expected. So I saw that both campaigns agreed to the terms and agreed to the moderators and the times and whatever. Mm-hmm. And the moderators, as I just saw like a brief list, are like a Fox News reporter, a CNN reporter, a Fox News reporter, and an NPR or something like that. Like generally more one-sided news sources back and forth. And so in this circumstance, I was kind of expecting more one-sided questions, but I thought that I was pretty impressed with generally hard, at least direct to the point questions on both sides. I think that there was some questions that I would have liked to ask, right? I think I like the style of town hall debates when we're talking presidential, because you end up with citizen-generated questions. Or, they were getting this question from Twitter or from wherever. And I think that's kind of neat because it's ideally reflective of what the public wants. And I think this debate did actually pose some questions that the public would want answered. And I thought that it did so in a pretty, good format. But I think it's, we've talked actually about this topic a lot here, judicial intervention, right? Mm-hmm. Like the idea of a judge having to enter into, or in this case, a moderator, enter into the debate and how that affects where things sway out. Jared, what do you think? Do you feel that it was unbiased? Do you feel like the moderator becomes a part of debate and ends up swaying the outcome because they're there and have to do what they're going to do? Or,
well, the thing is, if the moderator's job is to enforce the time limits, then the person who violates those time limits the most is going to get sanctioned the most. You know what I mean? It's like the only way that you could treat them the same is if they both violate those rules at the same level, and that's not what happened. So,
just to interject a little bit, I'm asking more just about substance of the questions, because I agree with you that if someone keeps talking over the other person like I am right now, I'm sorry, that's different than I'm asking neutral. I mean, as far as the questions and stuff like that.
Yeah, as far as the questions go, it's kind of like, why should people believe you rather than your opponent? Is the sort of cookie cutter way that Wallace did all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so. That is kind of inherently neutral. It's like, why should they believe you?
I just feel entitled to just steer our conversation a little bit. So I want to just take it to the point, specifically time. The way in debate, In courtrooms, pretty much too. I mean, not so much in courtrooms. In debate, there's specific time. We know
Yeah.
the rules. That's one of the most important rules. And like your coach tells you, and if they haven't told you, I'm telling you, you fill time. You use 7 minutes. You use 5 minutes. You use all of your time, but not a second more. And you do not speak when someone else is speaking. Like, these are cardinal rules that if you break, you lose, no matter how good your arguments are, right, in debate, a lot of times. So, Jared, I mean, obviously it's different. Why do you think that is, and how does it affect the debate in general?
People have this sort of misconception that debate is naturally this free-flowing exchange where people just trade off all the time. And if you leave things open, because that's what happened, is that they had 2 minutes opening comments, and they did okay. You know, they interjected every once in a while, but it was when they came into
then open discussion. Discussion.
Of course, you're giving people free reign to just talk over each other. Now, I would say like cross-examination in debates kind of approach that, but even those are way better. You know what I mean?
They did a little bit of that yesterday. You noticed that?
Yeah, they kind of naturally did that. But like the cross-examination in a policy debate or many types of debate allows both people to interact at the same time, right? Both
equally.
People, equal opportunity to speak, right? So in that, it gets a little bit more chaotic. I noticed that my students get a little bit more intimidated at the cross-ex section because it seems more like you're kind of at each other. But this was just like talking over. You know what I mean? It's like you can't understand what anyone's saying. Yeah,
competing styles there, right? So, Matt, I know you did a whole lot of public forum at the national level. So public forum versus, say, like Lincoln Douglas or policy debate has crossfire versus cross-examination. I know that some versions at some levels tweak it a little bit, but cross-examination is supposed to be one directional, right? So the affirmative cross-examines the negative. And so it's just one team's turn to ask questions, one team's turn to answer. And that, I think, keeps it a little bit more clean, right? Like it keeps it in line, at least, so that one person is functionally in control of the questions. And sure, they have to, pare the person down if answers are going too long, but even still, like it sets a more, clean guideline. Versus crossfire in public forum is kind of like what we experience, but just at like a really, really devolved level where they're not even asking each other questions, but it's just back and forth. And it seems like the moderator tried to pick out at a few different points a question or something that was pertinent, or like a question that was begged, and attempted to ask that in. And that becomes a new way of swaying the debate, right? Like if it is not a predetermined question, but something the moderator determines out of the exchange and then asks it to one side or the other, even though those things very rarely landed in last night's debate because it was just a lot more mayhem at those points. Those questions, I think, become a really interesting channel that drives the conversation and ultimately impacts the outcome and what is discussed and where it goes. So I don't envy that job by any stretch, but I think that as a format just kind of lends itself to happening in that way. I think that there are some debate norms that could be instituted in presidential, so competitive collegiate and high school debate norms that, if instituted at the presidential level, could make for more reasonable exchanges of ideas rather than what we saw.
You asked a bunch of stuff, and I want to talk about all of it, to be honest with you. So, like, first and foremost, there are multiple kinds of public forum. That's true. The kind I competed in nationally was traditional public forum, where there was no crossfire. But a lot of public forum does have crossfire. In fact, at that tournament, there was a crossfire division, but I did traditional.
Okay.
But I've competed in crossfire, and what you're saying is exactly right. Normally, conventional debate, when the affirmative speaks and then there's cross-ex, the neg gets to ask them questions. That's one directional. It's not like it doesn't go both ways. Okay, one person asks, one person answers, and in crossfire, it can go both ways. The affirmative can ask a question standing at the podium to the neg who's still sitting at standing at their desk, who's probably asked the first one. They're always so cordial. Oh, please ask the first question. Like, right. So, what I will say is this: in both forms, this is where I will, as debaters, we talk out of both sides of our mouth a lot. Okay, so I'm going to start talking out of both sides of my mouth. On one hand, we have to be civil. And even in these exchanges where there's opportunity to just dominate, right? Part, in my mind at least, of what people are judging you on is your civility and your ability to not be scared to be quiet because you're not scared of the question.
On some ballots, there's some debate ballots that have like courtesy as one of the things that count towards points.
Yep.
So you want to be courteous and you want to be civil. And in my true opinion, like if you have a jerk debater who's doing a really good job being a bully and you have a courteous civil debater who's doing a really good job, it might go to that person because they
regardless of the arguments.
Regardless of because once the arguments go away and you're like, well, what else am I judging in this roundabout? So I tend to go with try to always be civil. Now, here's where we talk. Courtesy should count. Thank you, Aaron. I agree. It does count. No matter what you think, it does count.
Oh, I got it. All right. Nice.
Now, on the flip side, here's where we talk out of the other side of our mouth. Good debaters. Man, if you have the floor, you could talk and you could talk and you could talk, and there's nothing. Both of these guys right now are just itching to say something because they want to fill the time because they can, and they have things going on in their heads where it's like, if I just had the floor right now, I could just keep talking. And I think what directs a lot of this presidential speech, and I think one thing people focus on is when, the American public or a judge, they want to see people talking. Okay, and there's some statistic out there, I'm sure, that says like if you speak more, statistically speaking, like they're gonna like you more. Or I mean, like I don't know these things, but like there's a part of the especially a good example of this is like the Democratic debates or the Republican debates where there's 10 people up there, right?
Okay.
And they're all just like waiting, and they just wish they could say something, and like one person just won't stop. That still is true, but it's way crazy with two people. Because with two people, it's like
I had an idea. I actually like sent a really quick email. I know it's going to get lost in their shuffle, but to the debate commission, I said, you know what? I think like asynchronous debate could solve a lot of this. Like I know it'll be highly produced videos and recorded and stuff like that, maybe, but whatever. I would just like to be able to understand what the message is at the very least. Just uninterrupted. Tell me what you're about. You know what I mean? If like that way, you can't complain about the moderator. The moderator isn't controlling the time. You know what I mean? It's like you can't interrupt the other person and stuff like that. Like I really think that at least one of the debates we could do an asynchronous one, and then you release it all at one time, and people like.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I think async can actually solve some of these problems. We got another one here.
Low point win. I am Captain Low Point Win, by the way. You know what I mean? That's my name. Like everyone gets speaker points, and I got the win. And like, okay, well, I guess that's good. That's cool.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
Low point win.
Get a lot of winning records and never get like speaker points.
That was me. That was literally me. Like I didn't set records or nothing. I would get third place and no speaker points and whatever.
Yeah.
So Jared, on this, I love the idea of asynchronous. Like that would be really cool because there's no possibility for either side to interrupt. But something I saw a lot of people throwing around as an idea was like, why can the moderator not mute one or both microphones? And the discussion on that, I think there was a good response to it. Is like, even if the bickering and crosstalk is very obnoxious and difficult to listen to, if a moderator were to silence one or both, it would seem extremely biased. And then the general public would all like speculate what was said and would want to hear the record of it. And so I thought that was at least a good response. Like, okay, even though it's difficult and frustrating to listen to, at least you get the whole picture.
Well, if the moderator's in charge of it, but like you can get a program that works to do that. It's not hard to put together a program where the microphone gets muted for each one, and then both of them be live at certain times as well. I mean, they pretty much
they'll still come through. They'll still they're in the room.
Yeah, the Supreme Court has like lights that go off, to tell you when you're not allowed to talk anymore. It's like that's like decades old. You know what I mean? It's like at
Dave
least
Chappelle, the Wrap It Up box, the music plays. Yeah, it's like okay.
Like you can at least do that. You can at least do that where like show the who's and yeah.
It won't stop them.
I think if a man yelling at them doesn't get them to stop, I don't think a blue light is
and that's where just to tie it all back, it's like It's like good debaters are able to. I use the word bully. I literally use that word. Like you want to be able to civilly, eloquently, interestingly dominate time to the point where like they want to hear you in that room. But you want and in cross-examination, which is where we started, you're basically like the game is even when it's one direction or two. You guys both know this. When it's one direction or crossfire, if you're like, Matt, how do you feel about the economy if this, that, and the other thing? I go, excuse me, blah, 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 and I'll just talk and talk and talk, and I'll talk and talk and talk, and you're like, okay, that's enough. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's enough. Okay, I have another question. And like, to the extent where I want to sound civil, I will stop. And I will be like, I'm not scared of your next question. Please answer. But on the other side is like, if you feel or can create the situation where you feel like you've set up a moment where you're like, oh, I could just talk to you all day about how good of a question that was for me. Do it. Because if they don't have a question, then I guess, the last thing is this. If they don't, being short, in my opinion, also is smart if you do not have an answer. If you don't have any answers, if you get asked a question that you don't know, we've said it on this show. It's like, I don't know. Next question. And now it's like the burden's on you. Do you have a question? You know
it's
what I mean?
easy
Like
to smell BS when someone is just talking and talking. You know they don't have an answer. Yeah,
that's rough.
The latest post I'm getting from Aaron is a good one here about this isn't. So this goes back to the audience, right? Whereas in a policy debate, in a college debate, you have the judge is the audience, an audience of one person, and they're usually, highly specialized in their ability to flow, answer, and follow arguments. They're familiar with the literature and everything like that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get millions of people, and so it's spectacle, it's kabuki. You know what I mean? They have to like create these moments, and that's why I was kind of disappointed when the first things I was seeing as a result of this was when Biden told Trump to shut up. It's like, oh, he told him to shut up. I'm like,
no, but like in my mind, you're like sitting there like, dude, everyone's losing decorum here. We need someone to remain the adult.
Everyone's waiting. It's like, oh, who's gonna own each other? You know what I mean? It's like they're just waiting for those moments, and that was.
I think Biden was the first person to really chip in while the other person was speaking. I watched it again, like the first little bit, and it was just like, there were, as far as decorum, I think that's the word, as far as civility, like we can argue who did the more, but there was mistakes. Like there was things where like both Biden and Trump did things where in a competitive debate, you'd be frowned upon. It'd be frowned upon to do what they did.
But it looks like people are frowning upon this though too. You know what I mean? It's like
and just to go to Aaron's point, another thing, a point I had written down that I wanted to talk about a little bit was like, policy debate is about argument. I think what Aaron means, I think what she's talking about is like, tell me about your policies. Tell me about how you feel about law and order. Tell me about how you feel about foreign policy. Whatever the question is, in presidential debates, just like in competitive debates, we do expect the candidates to have policy-driven, funding arguments, stuff like that. Like we want to hear why. What is your plan for X problem, and how do you plan to accomplish it? Now, hold on. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't mean to cut you off.
No. I thought you were done.
One thing,
gentlemen. What are
ad hominem. Jared, really quickly, what does ad hominem mean?
It means at the person,
not the argument. So I think one difference though, which is the difference of the nature of a presidential debate as a competitive debate, is the person standing in the room to some degree, who they are matters. So I think one reason why there may be room, in my opinion, for more ad hominem like attacks in a presidential debate than in a competitive debate, because the competitive debate to some degree is purely about argument. We don't want to hear about anything else. I think that's the culture we've created. If you were in a debate round with a serial killer, you might say that, and that might affect a judge, right? I just mean to say that, like in a presidential debate, we're talking about the person we want to represent our country, and so the person or the ad hominem attack, which may have some I'm attacking Jared the person, not what he's saying. That does matter more. What do you think, Tim?
I think that's still a logical fallacy, though, because I think that it's regularly used to mask an otherwise logically cogent statement or logically coherent statement.
Hold on, before you jump
I understand. I totally get what you're saying in that it is part of the decision. Like, I'm not voting necessarily for someone's policies. Weirdly, like, honestly, even as I say that, that feels weird that we're not necessarily even voting for the person. We're voting for the personality. Like, that's kind of BS and like kind of against the point.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. So I think it's just a matter of ideals. If someone wants to vote for the policies, then let's talk about the policies. But you're right. It is just kind of this cult of personality, this warring personalities. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and this is where, Jared, I think you maybe touched on a little bit before. So like I did my best to like flow the actual debate, right? And like follow arguments. And
I actually did. I tried to.
Like things really don't line up. But I think where there would be additional value if, presidential debates, besides the asynchronous, that I think is probably the best idea, is if you could follow one argument through. And that means that there can't be, I guess there has to be moderator, but if there were closing arguments, right? Like, Matt, in a courtroom, you bring things up and then you get, cross-examination, or you get cross-examination of the witness and then back and forth, and like you get the ability to interact, and then there are closing statements. I didn't feel that there were closing statements that many debates sometimes include, but I think that means that a lot of threads got lost. And understandably, the moderator had to cut things off for time, but you literally you lost out on where things happen, like where they conclude, right?
I think a closing argument is a lot about, in my opinion, a closing argument. I have no experience with a closing argument yet, but someday you will see. Closing arguments, you're trying to really hit it home. You're always trying to hit everything home, but like in a closing argument, you're looking for the sound bite. You're trying to end on that high note. I can't help but think that the whole entire presidential debate, they're really trying to just get a giant pile of the same type of notion that you're trying to get at the very end. Like, you just want that instant gratification, like soundbite right now that's just gonna end it all. Like that's what they are looking for from the moment time starts. And like,
I watched this thing, I could totally see the coaching behind it, right?
Yeah,
like I did. Because Trump is like, all right, we want everyone to think that you're just, you're way more energetic, because the whole thing is Sleepy Joe, right? So he's like, you got to be on the attack all the time. And I just don't. I think Trump didn't know how to dial it down, to the like, you don't have to be that much. And then, but for Joe, like, he was totally thrown off his game for that first 30 minutes. For 30 minutes, he was like, he was just bewildered. I guess like he didn't. But then, like, when he started talking,
and then he started saying things like calling him a clown, and he started saying "shut up," and.
But he started talking at the camera. I'm like, oh, that's what they were working on. That was what they were.
Right, that was the coaching point. Start all of your sentences with "here's the fact," "here's the truth," "here's the fact," "here's the truth." Like, that was his sentence starter each time. So I learned something very, very interesting partway through. I did not know this, but Joe Biden actually has a stutter, like as a fundamental like speech limitation. He lives with a stutter, and like has obviously worked his entire career to get better at it. Like, you don't work in politics and not. But I thought that was an interesting point, that like that isn't publicized huge, and yet like there were points that I kind of expected Trump to call out stumbles or stutters, or like when Joe Biden would say, here's a stat, or actually I meant this, or I meant this. I expected Trump to call that out, but I was kind of surprised to see he held off, and maybe that's just because of, I don't know, recognition of that. But knowing that there's a stutter, and knowing like the difficulty from a speech pathology standpoint, right? Like getting into a smooth stream of words and getting into a sentence and then having it interrupted regularly makes that nearly impossible. And I think that was like pretty clearly a tactic. And as soon as I learned that, I saw it happening more and more. Like, oh, I get it. As soon as he gets on a roll, he might get to a good point. So interjection and heckling from the other side, like obviously that throws off anyone. But if you've got a stutter, that really kind of makes an impact.
Yeah,
so I thought that was
an element. Yeah, I'll jump in on this one because I did NPDA, I did Parley, and so we had we didn't have flex time. Yeah, we didn't have this flex time that these kids have these days, right? And so it was points of information that you got to ask questions during their speech, okay? And so anytime someone was on a roll, we're like, we better ask a question, right? And it didn't matter.
You're dumb not to.
Yeah, you know, like.
No, and this goes. You know what's funny is, Jared. You know, this goes to show you, like the tactics. Some tactics, man, they're malicious. Like, I'm trying to knock someone off their game who's doing good. You need to be civil when you raise your hand and as a POI in a parley round. Let the judge see you hold your hand up, because at some point they are the jerk for not answering you. And but don't belabor it, because now you've ruined your chance. You know what I mean? So civility is important. And I want to finish also with just kind of I thought the breaks are interesting because they have a lot of time. It feels like they have a lot of time. They may even know when they're not on camera and stuff like that, where they just have time. Whereas in debate, there's not a lot of time. You're like on, and you're supposed to be on right now, and there's no handing off the ball. I don't want to say who do you think won, because I really don't care who you think won. How do you know who won? Is the election determine the winner? What do you think?
Yeah.
Does the election does this even affect the election? How's that? I mean, does this debate does the election reflect who won this debate?
Like I said, yeah, but minimally, like somebody actually took the time to take a measurement of how much they thought, and they said like 3%. I'm like, okay, maybe that's like that ain't much. That's much.
You can poll immediately before and poll immediately after, maybe, and there's a way to get some metric.
That's one of the last thing. We're going a little over time, but I want to talk about this. That might be a good way to integrate into a presidential debates, is the Oxford style, where you get a bunch of undecided people in the audience, you poll them beforehand, and then they watch the and you poll them
They're
afterwards.
all Russians.
Yeah, so you know what I mean? That's also way.
No, it's really cool
to see what the debate commission comes up with, because they said they're making some changes. I
want
to know
for as arbitrary as all those debate ballots are out there, the competitive ballots. Just know that at least we get the opportunity to have some sort of resolve, because forever and ever and ever Joe Biden and Donald Trump will wonder who won the debate. And they'll never get the satisfaction of knowing they won or lost. So enjoy it. And you guys, it's been a total pleasure talking to you all tonight.
Ballots are a good thing. Ballots are a good thing. All right, everybody. Hey, listen, we got to wrap it up here, but we'll be back next week. If you have any suggestions about what you want us to talk about, leave them in the comment section. We really thank you for joining us. We have Matt Shapiro, Esquire, Tim Seavey, Jared Kubika Miller. We're DebateSensei. We'll see you next week. Okay, everyone?
Thank you, Aaron. You're the best.